Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and we got a fun one for you. About a week ago, Jay Dyer and I got together and we talked a range of issues from the occult to serial killers, and I'm sure we're going to revisit a lot of that stuff. But just today, I came across this Lil Nas X video on top of the promo with this non-Nike but pseudo-Nike 666 limited edition Mischief sneaker with literal bloodletting in it. And I thought it would be great to not only break that down, but break down Hollyweird's obsession with the occult and especially Satanism, Luciferianism, where it all comes from, and much more. I want to encourage everybody to go check Jay out on Twitter at J_D007, jaysanalysis.com for everything else. And before we get going, I want to show everybody the video of this sneaker because we're going to get to the video of Lil Nas X. So this company called Mischief basically took an old school Nike sneaker, made a limited edition, 666 of them, and then got a promo deal with Lil Nas X, which may be the most extreme satanic video we have seen to date put out by the music industry in unison. So to break it all down, we are now with the one, the only Jay Dyer. Jay, thank you so much for joining us, brother.
Thanks, Jason. Glad to be back. Sorry we had such bad technical difficulties last time, but we can always be over here on Rockfin. And by the way, I just got my stuff all set up, so it should be good to go with Rockfin the next week or so.
I'm very excited about that. Obviously, we need more creators like yourself, especially with all the censorship. And now, really, the industry, in my opinion, being bolder than ever with this next run. I don't know if you've seen the video yet, but we're going to show a still shot for you. I don't know how much more I want to show it. But basically, you know, it's the story of the fallen angel and the ambiguity between a man and a woman. And now, of course, you know, Lil Nas X, this is a very homoerotic thing, but where he actually descends into hell, has sex with Satan, basically, in a laptop dance fashion, as you're watching here. And then ultimately, at the end, goes behind him, breaks his neck, and wears his crown, becoming his own Luciferian type demon. Let's just kind of, for the audience, gets behind him, cracks the neck, takes the crown, and ascends as the new devil. So, I mean, you know, this one might, and the grind scene is pretty hardcore. This may be just the most outward, in-your-face, satanic worship of a pop star that I've seen yet. But it's certainly not the first. So maybe you want to talk about that a little bit. I mean, especially Hollywood music, the entertainment industry kind of has this love affair with the occult and Lucifer.
Well, last night I was actually researching an area of this that I didn't know about. It was all new to me, and it was looking into a famous cult from the 80s and 90s known as the Matamoros cult. And the reason I bring that up is because it was actually birthed in the U.S., but it was situated down on the border of Texas and Mexico.
Brownsville,
and it
right?
had connections to all of the elites in Mexico City. In fact, the guy who ran the cult, a guy named Costanzos, I think was his name, he chose a girl to be his high priestess, Sarah Adele or Adrelte or something like that. But she had been raised in a what appears to be a generational satanic family. The guy billed himself as the psychic to the stars in Mexico. Okay, so he was best friends with the cops, the Interpol agent in Mexico from European Interpol. He had all of these celebrities and pop stars in Mexico, and Spanish pop stars, right, come hang out at his lavish pad. And at the same time as all this is going on, he's running this literal mind control human sacrifice cult. And so it's not just Hollywood. It seems to be a pattern of the elites in other countries, international pop stars and elites. There's similar stories of Epstein-style situations with Latin American and South American. I think Brazil, there was a famous case of an Epstein-style situation in Brazil that Dave McGowan mentions first few chapters of his book. So the pattern seems to be the same, that when you get to a certain level, you're kind of expected to join, right, this coterie, this mindset that involves higher and higher levels of degeneration, or I guess you could say darker, lower levels of degeneration, right? Because the blackmail needs to be stronger. They need to. It's like when the mob, right, initiates a person to be a capo or something like that. You need to make your bones. You got to kill somebody because they want to have dirt on you to ensure that you don't go against them. And it seems to be the same pattern here with the elites, is that as you go up the ladder of so-called success, right, they want to have, you know, more and darker information on you. And not just from a pragmatic standpoint, it really seems that there's a darker power component to this. People literally believe that they're gaining metaphysical power. I was just last point here. I was just reading an interview talking about Ted Bundy, and it's another killer who claims to have had interactions with Ted Bundy and exchanged letters. And he claims that Bundy was writing letters to him asking, I want to know exactly the means and the methods of how, when I do these kind of ritual killings, I will obtain greater metaphysical power. So the people who are in this, they actually believe they're gaining that power.
Well, in the Matamoros case, that's on the border of Brownsville, Texas, actually. And I remember a long, long time ago looking into that, and I had this rare hardcover book that got into it. And when you talked about brutal killings, we're talking about skinning people alive in some cases. They found some people that were literally skinned head to toe. So once again, you think that this darkness is just in some Hollywood movie. That especially, I think of Predator 2. There's that weird ceremony where they do something similar. And of course, the Predators do that to their victims as well. Kind of that similarity there. But in reality, this is happening. And another aspect of that Matamoros cult was they were into drug running and with the cartels. Right. You know, and that's another interesting aspect, because when you look at Epstein, you look at women, you look at possible drug running with the Adnan Khashoggi connection, possibly in the Iran-Contra era, and of course, arms dealing. Basically, the upper echelons of those corruptions that can really basically compromise anybody that wants power in some manner or level. And now the worship of that through the entertainment industry. And it's so bizarre because at one point you see them glorifying it, you know, people trying to be edgy, trying to be artistic, who knows, right? But some people actually buying into it. And some who have really bought into it and at least acted like they've promoted it, becoming super successful. And I think that one of the biggest modern examples would be Jay-Z and Beyonce. So why not talk about that? Maybe they weren't in the club at the time, but they certainly used their symbolism and their Hollywood status to elevate themselves.
Yeah, that is a great example. And yeah, I wanted to be clear. There's a lot more, as you know, on Matamoros. That one point that I just learned last night, getting deeper into this, was that they seem to have a connection to what serial killer Henry Lee Lucas calls the Hand of Death cult, which had multiple covens, right, in different big cities. So there's a connection with a ranch in California where serial killer Leonard Lake seems to have hung out for about 8 years. There's a connection to the head of the Matamoros cult was from Mexico City and then moved eventually to Brownsville to run the cult there. And then there's another connection between, as you mentioned, the drug running, arms trafficking, and human trafficking that goes to Chicago with the Chicago mob there. So the Chicago mob had a direct connect to the Matamoros cult, which was reported, I think, in the Brownsville Herald back in the 80s. So all of that's a lot of new information to me. I'd heard about Matamoros. I knew that they were kind of but this is what we're seeing as a pattern, as you know, right, Jason, you've covered, NXIVM and Epstein quite extensively. And I remember reading a few articles that NXIVM had connections to human trafficking, to drugs, and to elites in Mexico as well. So this is, again, a recurring pattern. And to bring it back to Hollywood and Jay-Z and Beyonce, they're great examples of people who seem to have kind of gotten to a certain level. And, you know, I remember listening to Jay-Z back when, you know, remember when he had his first or a couple singles, Big Pimpin'. Remember when that was out in like 99, 2000, 2001.
Top down
And there
money ain't
wasn't
a thing, Jay.
there wasn't really anything esoteric. And then I remember there was a specific point where he sort of suddenly, around 2004, 5, you started noticing, he had his symbol, which is the triangle of manifestation, right? Where he's calling on Hova, right? Which is, I'm assuming, some variation of Jehovah. And if you have studied, esoteric type of occults and hermetic groups, right, that is part of you'll find pictures of Crowley doing this triangle manifestation, which is intended, right, to channel the magician's will to bring about, right, whatever his intended purpose is. So there was some point in the early 2000s where apparently Jay-Z had gotten into this. He got deeper into it. I remember reading articles where he would talk about that before he would do any freestyle, he would like go and like meditate, and he would say, he would be like, I go in my mind and I try to let some other thing talk through me. Whether that's the case, I don't know, but that was at least what he was trying to do, was invoke, right, this alternate idea of or an alternate spirit, an alternate identity. And then when, he was with Beyonce, then we start seeing her transformation from this, R&B pop singer to a kind of quasi Madonna, they start wearing like Crowley shirts, right? Do what thou will. They start, talking about how they're bringing about their own psychological transformation through these rituals. Then you start seeing just openly satanic rap videos, which again still didn't exist. There were a few groups like 666 Mafia that kind of donned this aesthetic of the satanic. Maybe they took it seriously, but maybe it's just an aesthetic, just a branding thing. But it started looking more and more serious. You start watching these videos and they get darker, they get more degenerate, more weird, more creepy. And I think that, again, probably more people take it serious than people think. People think, oh, it's just gimmick. Oh, it's just branding. I'm sitting here reading like all of these serial killers and their manifestos, their history, their background, like they take it serious. They're not just doing it for fun. Now, maybe not everybody takes it serious. Maybe their handlers don't all take it serious, but at least some people take it serious.
Absolutely. And, thinking back to what really solidified it for me with Beyonce was, I remember I was watching the Super Bowl with my girlfriend at the time, and the halftime show was coming up, and it was the year that Beyonce was doing it. We were talking, I go, you watch how crazy and occultic this thing is going to end up being. And of course, it was the infamous one where she was a goddess and it was in black and white. And there was all sorts of Egyptian and quote unquote Illuminati esoteric symbolism. And it even had that blackout period, which had never occurred, which some people kind of speculated was part of that ritual. So, even her, who was super skeptical, goes, how did you know that was going to happen? And I'm just like, just the patterns of the way that they're acting and what we've seen throughout history and how this is a real push. And in my mind, it's a real push to do what? To normalize it, to maybe not push you into quote unquote Satanism or Satan worship, but to normalize it as mythology, as fiction. And they really want morality to go that route, to just be mythology. It's not really morality, it's just mythology. You don't have a soul. We could be part of a simulation. We kind of touched on these things now, but especially in this video where basically you have this pop rap star that was with Billy Ray Cyrus, the honky-tonk country loving guy with, don't break my, achy breaky heart from the 90s. Couldn't have been more corny, right? And they bring him in for like this rap-studded video. He's a spokesperson for fast food and Mountain Dew. And the next thing he's doing, and I guess we'll skip through some of it. By the way, the video is not even really original. It's a total ripoff of another video. Basically he looks, like he's in chains up in heaven. It's not, heaven is definitely not good enough for him. So he's going to descend, as an angel looks upon him, down a strip pole of hell. And as he descends down the stripper's pole, obviously it's extremely sexual and we're going to not go there. But then he gets on top and rides Satan out. And then basically as a Luciferian or a Satanist would, do as thou wilt, betrays him, kills him, and replaces him. It's a lovely message to be sending to our youth, and you wonder where we're at this time. But you know what? Our society does respect that power and force. They do worship those that look at people as material things, as women as material things, as those the goals in the life. Oh, he's a billionaire or he's a millionaire. He has a nice car. It doesn't matter how they get there. And I think that's part of this transhumanist push. And it's certainly one that we've seen with the Hermetic symbolism. I got my little Hermetic angel shirt on, the as above, so below. Why don't you talk about that, the inversion of the sexes and kind of this androgyny and ambiguity that we've seen?
Well, in a lot of the Hermetic myths, there's the idea that we all originated from some higher power or form that was perfectly one. And so the fact that there's divisions or that there's male and female, right? If you look at the way alchemy works, it's always trying to overcome separation and division and to achieve that reunification. So from their perspective, a lot of the esotericists and the Luciferians and the Hermeticists, they will argue that it's just part of the evolutionary process to evolve back into some, more higher unified form that is not divided. And so that's the supposed justification for why, we got to overcome male versus female, right? This kind of stuff. All limitations, right, have to be overcome in order to achieve or to evolve into being some kind of God form or some kind of deity or some kind of God. I think the videos mythology is kind of absurd. I mean, the idea that I guess the idea is that, well, Satan was once perhaps some kind of lower power being that evolved to be the highest power being, and that he could be dethroned and man could take over that role. That itself, I think, is a satanic lie. I mean, angels and demons are spiritual beings. They're not beings that you can crack their neck with a twist, like a Steven Seagal move or something. But so it's all kind of silly, but it echoes the desire of man to transcend the bodily limitations. And this is why most of the Luciferians like transhumanism. They like the idea that, I'll be able to get out of my body and I'll be downloaded to the cloud and all this nonsense, which is silly. But that's the purpose of inversion. They believe is part of the alchemical process to bring about the next phase. So just like death, even though we don't like death, we don't like decay and corruption, it's part of the natural process to bring about the next phase or stage. And that's how they see evil. They don't see evil as a moral thing to oppose, but that it's just the flip side of the good, right? It's like, there's the good, but there's also the evil, and both of them are equally necessary. And so evil just furthers this process as much as good does. And so inverting things or doing degrading acts and this kind of stuff in a lot of the darker cult societies, they think really is just part of the process. You just have to do it. I think that's a very, very evil, dangerous philosophy because it justifies anything, right? Mm-hmm. Then you start to say, all evil is just necessary. You have child molesters, all this stuff is just part of the process. It's just necessary. And by the way, this is, again, you read a lot of the serial killers. This is literally their philosophy, right? Manson had this philosophy from the process church that Jesus is the flip side of Satan. They're both equally necessary. Good is evil, right? That's what Helter Skelter is kicking off death, chaos, revolution for the purpose of furthering this apocalyptic vision of the new aeon, right? Which the Satanists talk about.
Yeah, and you even see that balance in other different types of religions, philosophies. Probably the most significant is the yin and the yang, of course, right. Good and evil, black and white. And obviously, gray area exists. And I don't think that I have all the answers. But when you talk about evil, to me, when you see some of these things, it's inherent. And you see the sexualization of children in that push. And a lot more lately in the last 4 or 5 years, whether it be Drag Time Story Hour or, like I just said, this is somebody that, whatever, I don't care what his sexual preference is. But I can tell you right now, this hit song is going to be heard by 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds. Everybody saw that video. A lot of them are going to see this one. And I mean, I don't know that I want to see like anybody grinding on Satan, but especially Little Nas X. Just my opinion. You know what I'm saying? And we have seen the encouragement. You know, we get to Billy Ray Cyrus. Look at his daughter. Talk about both sexes and kind of inversion of reality. She had that phase where she was gallivanting around with a prosthetic penis everywhere, the androgyny coming through again. And that is an example of a childhood star. That's, you know, what was her thing? Miley, Hannah Montana.
Hannah Montana.
Yeah, Hannah Montana.
Yeah.
So you see the evolution. A lot of these things, you know, people take them through their childhood, and then they get to this point in their careers, and they go totally occultic, totally satanic, totally bizarre. And I don't know that that's a mistake. Again, I think some people are exploiting it, but you see the ones that really, really endorse it continue to be at the top of the cultural zeitgeist, or at least be able to re-enter it at any time. You know, another great example of that in the music industry would be Lady Gaga. I mean, talk about some of the symbolism she's used over the years.
Yeah, she has used some very self-consciously Crowleyan imagery. There was a concert where she was sort of bent over backwards and doing these kind of weird sort of meditational type poses with a specifically Crowleyan all-seeing eye. She, you know, has all the MK Ultra alter mind control themes, you know, throughout her videos, as does, you know, Katy Perry, most of these pop stars, etc. But you're definitely right that Lady Gaga seems to have a more of an occultic, esoteric type of bent. There was one specific award show where she was sort of hanging as a human slab of meat with covered in blood as a sacrifice, wearing kind of a white virgin dress as if she'd been sacrificed. I think it was one of the MTV or VMAs. And then you've got, you know, Pink is being initiated in a wearing like with her hands in the, I think it's the Dugard or one of those Masonic poses. She's got the noose around her neck, and she's got her, you know, her pant leg pulled up. She's got, you know, the checkered floor underneath her, very consciously a Masonic style initiation. And if you study witchcraft or the history of witchcraft, they actually, modern Wiccans and witchcraft have actually borrowed their, you know, they point the sword on the breast. So that's all borrowed out of Masonry. So they actually borrow elements of Masonry. And the reason for that is that the father of modern witchcraft, Gerald Gardner, the father of Wicca, which is, well, it's a made-up religion, by the way. It's not a real ancient religion. It's a modern guy's made-up religion. Gardner was a student of Crowley, and he went up the ranks of Crowley's secret society, and then he starts his cult, right, which is the modern witchcraft cult. And that's what you, and because Crowley borrowed so much of his rites and rituals from Masonry, this is why you see so many religions having the same patterns, is because it's all kind of cribbing, copy-paste jobs from, I would say, Crowley's sect. And by the way, that seems to be the interest of Jay-Z and Beyonce is Crowley. It's like a graduate school for creating your own religion. And the reason it's relevant to the pop stars is that Crowley had statements where he would say things like, well, even if you're not like really literally becoming a god, the next best thing would be to be seen as a god, right, in the minds of the masses. So you could see that would be very useful to a pop star, right? That's exactly what a pop star wants to be. Even if they're not literally becoming a god, they're at least being perceived like they're a god. And I would say that that's not the only level to this. There's literally also a higher level of people who think. I mean, there is a transhumanist component to Crowley's philosophy that they think that you can transmute the body limitations and like Crowley said, storm heaven to dethrone God and become God.
Absolutely. And kind of just shifting gears a little bit because you've mentioned it and we didn't really get to talk about it enough, is you've been talking, like you said earlier, a lot about these serial killers, their connections to the occult. But then on top of their connections to their occult, the connections to the upper echelons of society, whether it be other religions, the police, political parties and figures. I saw you just tweet out the picture of John Wayne Gacy and Jimmy Carter's wife. The Clown and the Candyman recently talked about his relationship with upper echelon Chicago and Illinois politicians as well. There's actually another series out, apparently, that I have not seen yet. I want to see what they do with it, if they go hard at it, but it's a new Gacy one. But The Clown and the Candyman really did that. and then went beyond Gacy, right? Dean Carroll and others, and talked about, these connections. So why don't we talk about that a little bit? That these serial killers, aside from just being into the occult, also have connections to politicians who sometimes, Jay, also have connections to the occult.
Yes. Now, let's see. I have a handy little list that I made of all of the serial killers. And the reason I'm going to list this list is because it will explain, I think, a big puzzle piece for the political connection. So, first point, and this was actually reported first in 2002 in the Canadian Globe and Mail. And a journalist there noticed that there seemed to be a pattern in a lot of the serial killers, which was that they all have basically a military background. And a lot of them appear to have had military background service during the Vietnam era, right? So now, not necessarily every one of these people is in the Vietnam period, but many of them are. So who are the serial killers who had military service? Dahmer, Berkowitz, Richard Williams, John Muhammad, Gary Ridgway, Roy Norris, Charles Whitman, Leonard Lake, Arthur Shawcross, Charles Ng, Anthony Sowell, Dean Corll, Dennis Nilsen, Gary Heidnik, Robert Lee Yates, Richard Allen Davis, Timothy McVeigh, Randy Kraft, right? And I'm sure we could find many, many more. Now, why does that matter? Well, being in the military would give them a kind of connection to higher level masters, we'll say, right? I dug up that what appears to be an embassy cable, which is relating to the time period when Dahmer was stationed in Germany. And Dahmer was stationed there right at the same time as there was a spate of murders of men and women in pretty brutal kind of types of murders in about a few-year period. And the German government actually requested information from the U.S. on Dahmer and his time there. They wanted to investigate him for those murders. And there was a reply that the investigation was quashed because there was a connection to a higher level general. Okay, so at least somebody in a very higher level strata. So they squashed that investigation. Now, why is that relevant? Well, there's another serial killer that's named Gary Heidnik, and he was stationed 30 minutes from Dahmer in Germany so both of these installations, by the way, are U.S. Army hospital installations in Germany. Now, again, that's where you would expect to see these kind of MK Ultra type programs. And we do know that Gary Heidnik was in MK Ultra. So does that, now I don't know for sure if Dahmer was, but if he's 30 minutes away, if Dahmer's suspicion in terms of his time period in Germany was squashed because of higher level military people, I mean, this to me suggests a very potential, there's very much a possibility that Dahmer could have been a kind of contract killer or a kind of assassin, perhaps initially for the military. And then I think what could happen is that sometimes these people just lose it. And that's not too far. I mean, this is even in pop culture, right? If you watch Apocalypse Now, Colonel Kurtz is this kind of a dude who has lost it. I mean, he's gone nuts, right? And he's run off into, Cambodia or wherever he is. And the Sheen character has to go track him down, right? And the character, by the way, of Colonel Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando, has a very Crowley-esque look and appearance. He's bald. He literally has the appearance of Crowley, and he even says Crowleyan type things, right? Man is God. I realized out here that I'm God, and I can be my own God to this tribe. They all worship me, right? And it's like, if I recall, it's a human sacrifice cannibal type of thing. Maybe not. It's been a while since I watched Apocalypse Now, but there's another movie with maybe Time Cop. Something. Dolph Lundgren plays a crazed Phoenix program Vietnam guy who went nuts. And if you remember, it's the movie. It's the one with him and Van Damme. I think that's.
I don't know if that one's Soldier. Time Cop. I don't. Man, which
is
one
it? Universal Soldier.
Universal Soldier. Yeah, it's definitely Universal.
And he wears the necklace of human fingers and ears, right? Because he's lost his mind. He's going nuts. But so that I think is one of the key components as to figuring out why. Plus, there's also an ONI Navy program that was done by Dr. Thomas Narut, the U.S. Regional Medical Center in Naples, Italy. He did a conference for NATO of 120 psychologists of a Navy-funded program that the New York Times admits was about profiling and finding psychopathic killers in jail or in military prison that the Navy could use. And so naturally, journalists said, use for what? Assassinations? Oh, no. There's no assassination program. We don't do that. It's just to use people for helping. We're going to help. What are you going to do with a bunch of Manson type people? Mm-hmm. Right. Well, obviously it's to create, right. And to see if you can create these kinds of programmed killer types. And I, if you'd asked me 5-6 years ago, I would have said, oh, the program's killer thing, that's like a Hollywood created thing. That's not real. I mean, maybe there's a program killer here and there, but once you get into the mob side of it and you see that there's Murder Inc. and you see that, oh, wait a minute, actually these serial killers do have, many of them, this background, that's when it starts to come together that you could have these kinds. And that's how they would have that higher level political connection. And recent, by the way, people think that all this stuff is solved. Like you pointed out with Clown and Candyman, this stuff comes out now. Like new evidence comes out now. Mm-hmm. There's new evidence out now that Ted Bundy had all these high level connections that people didn't know about 10, 20 years ago, right? Because the internet, right? And there's now new ways to, right, to exchange new information.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's speak to that a little bit in these high level connections and kind of Hollywood. At the tail end of the program, we started talking about True Detective. And True Detective was one of those shows that kind of blew my mind after the first season, and after the third season really took hold. And it was because when you're watching that first episode, you see the picture of these 4 people dressed in very like occultic, druidic type robes, the kind of thing that you might see at a Bohemian Grove or somewhere else. And then you get into this very, very dark story of children becoming missing. And of course, the first person murdered has the antler head. They're tied up in a certain way. They have the circular mark that now is pretty synonymous, as the FBI has revealed, with pedophilia. Okay, on top of everything. So after I saw the first episode, I was blown away. Forget about the first season. But then, as everything goes in, and I don't want to give too many spoilers here, but by the end of it, they found the bodies. They found the mass grave. This person is connected to the governor's family, and the way they get the tape that basically shows
evangelicals. Don't forget the evangelicals.
That's what I was about to say. The way they get the tape that shows this ceremony that eventually, you see the still picture, but then you get the video, and now they're all there about to sacrifice a little girl. And you see Woody Harrelson's shocked face. Well, the way that that's obtained is the evangelicals are connected, and it is the McConaughey character that goes in there and takes it from the safe of the head priest or pastor that is kind of one of these greasy guys, and a cousin of the governor. So when it all wraps up and they're looking into the stars, and there's a ton of great symbolism throughout, Woody's talking to him, and McConaughey goes, we didn't get them all, and he's really sad. And it's basically Woody Harrelson says, we never do. They never do. And it kind of trails off into the second season. And although this is an interconnected universe, that spoke a lot to me. And then you fast forward to the next season where they the third season, where they actually discuss the Franklin scandal by name. It's pretty incredible. I would say that that's probably the most accurate portrayal of power and the occult that's ever been put on television. I don't know how your feelings are if you've seen those 3 seasons.
No, it's in fact, I did a really long essay right after season 1 on my website at the time. It's still on the website, and I broke down all the symbolism, all the episodes and installments. It took me several days to write that piece. So yeah, I know it very well, because I was, like you, struck by what all was in there. And I didn't watch it the year it came out. I watched it the next year. So I don't know, it was 5 or 6 years ago. But the first season includes what the story is actually based on a real evangelical megachurch somewhere down in Louisiana, Bayou, I don't know where. But I read this whole background story. There's a giant Daily Mail article that I think it's Daily Mail. And it turns out, guess who the pastor of that church was into? Crowley. There was an evangelical pastor who was a secretly Crowley devotee. They were molesting people. That they were using the church's daycare as part of this process of doing this. Very reminiscent of the McMartin case, if you're familiar with the McMartin preschool case. And it tied to, yes, as always, high level, representative government, etc., and even wider than that, perhaps international types of rings. So a lot of that is hinted at in the show. And by the way, there's another angle to this that a lot of people miss, which is the biker gangs. I've never known anything about biker gangs. I'm not a biker dude, but biker gangs actually do factor into this. If you know the story of Altamont, Rolling Stones, and that whole story of the murders that happened at one of their concerts, everybody knows that the security for that event was, of course, Hell's Angels. And Hell's Angels do pop up in a lot of these serial killer stories as being connected to trafficking, drugs, humans, and these kinds of, and perhaps even contract killings. So, in fact, one of the famous serial killers, the woman serial killer that you probably have heard of, Eileen Wuornos, she was for many years hanging out with the Hell's Angels, and I'm assuming her prostitution. She was a prostitute and a serial killer. You've probably seen the
Monster,
Charlize Theron,
yeah.
Monster. She's playing. Well, it turns out that it appears that there could have been more going on with Wuornos, because some of the people that she killed happened to be people like child abuse investigators. A famous child abuse investigator is one of the killings. That to me could suggest an intentional hit. And the reason the intentional hit is important, or the contract killing element, is that suggests multiple accomplices. Remember, multiple accomplices doesn't just have to mean like another thug who's beating people over the head with you. It can be an accomplice above you that's paying you to do it, you see. And by the way, in many of the serial killer cases, the multiple accomplices story is known. It's confirmed, right? There's Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. They're the known two guys, at least in that operation. There's Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas. Those are two guys together in that operation, and many more operations that, including Bobby Berdella, including Gacy with Paskey and his associates, as you know. Richard Ramirez appears to have had accomplices and associates as well. Berkowitz has claimed for years to have had people working with him. So this suggests more than the mainstream narrative that we're told, that it's just lone nuts who lose their mind and they go out and they have a certain profile. They don't. In fact, most of the serial killers actually don't fit the profile. That's an invented thing in the media, the idea of the profile. And in fact, the profile is what I'm talking about: occult, contract killings, organized crime, high-level political connections, and multiple accomplices. That's the real pattern.
Absolutely. And the thing that's really, I guess, the one thing you can say they have in common is when you start talking to these investigators and people that find them, they say there is no official look for a quote-unquote pedophile, right? There is no look and say, oh, that's Absolutely. A pedophile. And then they say, and unlike other crimes with these people, they are completely unapologetic about it. They find a way to moralize it in a sense. And again, that comes back to the book of the law and the do as thou wilt philosophy that Crowley wrote down while incanting, right, and channeling this other being. So we've talked a lot about Crowley. Why don't you talk a lot about, or a little bit about that aspect of it, that so many of his writings were supposedly incantations from other demons that he was channeling?
Right. Let's see. I'm trying. So the one that comes to mind is when he was in the desert trying to do this ritual that took hours and hours and hours of crossing the abyss, and you have to interact with Choronzon, who's the demon of the abyss. And Crowley thought that if you cross the abyss, which you could either fall into madness, you would go crazy, or you would come out of the other side of the abyss being like the most powerful wizard or sorcerer or whatever. And this is a repeating pattern, but one thing to remember about that a lot of people miss, that my publisher has a book I don't think this book is by my publisher, but the author, Dr. Richard Spence, has a book called Secret Agent 666, and he actually theorizes that because Crowley wrote this drug diary, there might have been an proto version of MK Ultra, or that the idea for MK Ultra programs in the UK and in Tavistock and in the OSS and CIA might have actually come out of Crowley and his connection to the British elites. And because remember, Huxley and these guys are into LSD way before anybody else. Mm-hmm. And Crowley wrote this book called Drug Diary, and Dr. Spence speculates that could have actually been a study on the effects of various drugs to mind control, right? Because what do cult leaders do? They mind control their followers, right? They're like handlers, right? Mm-hmm. So I now kind of, when I look back on Crowley and a lot of these, like, I'm not saying there's not demons, but I'm saying that it's hard to know in a lot of the psychopathic evil people, because they lie a lot. Mm-hmm. So you're always kind of having to like fish between when's the serial killer, when's the cult leader lying and being just crazy narcissist, and when's he telling the truth.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, I want to make that clear too. I don't necessarily think that he's actually channeling demons. I'm just saying that that's how he wrote these. And, right. Especially when we get into the aspect of power ritual, where he talks about the most powerful thing being able to take a virgin young boy anally, and at the climax cut their throat, take that and drink their blood. It's almost like that's where this, I don't want to call it the adrenochrome myth, because obviously adrenochrome exists, but this idea of a heightened sense of awareness, adrenaline running, a virgin boy, his blood, sex magic, all coming together in a power ritual. And we know bloodletting rituals prior to that had been commonplace.
Yeah. You mentioned this rapper with his. He's the one that just put out this shoe, right?
Yeah, and it has the drop of blood in it.
Yeah, and that's what. So a lot of people are like, what is all this? They're trying to figure out what's going on here. Well, so a bunch of the killers are classified as collectors, right? Now, that is an FBI kind of serial killer name. That's not inaccurate, because a lot of these weirdos do seem to have this obsession with collecting either memorabilia from the people that are killed, or the body parts, or something like that, right? And so that it's almost like the idea that there's a transference of power or significance to that, like a religious relic, right? Like bodies of the saints, right? Or the icons of the saints, this kind of the cross being a powerful symbol, right? The occultic mindset has the same idea that the power that's released if you killed somebody or something like that it goes into the woman's shirt or her blouse or her bra, this kind of a thing, right? So they'll try to collect elements of the victims, because for them it's a kind of a religious relic. And so what they're doing with this shoe and this kind of stuff, I think, not just, they're making money, but they also see it as kind of like a way to like put their religious relics out into the world. And it's a very kind of animistic voodoo mindset, right? Like if you know how voodoo or candomblé or all those kind of indigenous Santeria type, like the way they view their little statues and their trinkets, is that they view it that way. It's witchcraft.
And that transference of power we see in pop culture, Hollywood entertainment, all over. I would say you look at Freddy Krueger, for instance, after he kills one of his victims, he absorbs their souls, and then you'll sometimes see that as they come out of his body and scream for help. Shang Tsung in the Mortal Kombat series, the way that he's able to rejuvenate himself and become more powerful from an old man to a young man is taking the souls of his victims. And that really does stem out of this belief that some have, that power can be transferred, and it can be transferred through these bloodletting rituals. We're coming up on almost an hour. Is there anything you kind of want to add to the modern Hollywood occultic Luciferian talk right now? We're in 2021. Things are getting wild. We could talk about a plethora of issues outside of this. This is actually kind of a good break, even though it's really dark subject matter, and it's real subject matter that I think people have to understand is an underlying reason that our current culture is as acquiescent as it is, because it does glorify self-indulgence. It does glorify ego. It does glorify materialism. And what it does is it pushes down actual empathy into the point where we're apathetic to almost everything. And that's what I think people are missing as they push this hypersexualized transhumanist agenda.
Well, I'm sure you remember that even 5-10 years ago, if you talked about this kind of stuff or these materials or this topic, people would be like, it doesn't exist, right? Mainstream people would, the blue check marks on Twitter would say, ha ha ha, they think that this is a real thing. And then within a few years, the Church of Satan, the Temple of Satan are now public entities in the U.S. They erect statues now. But it doesn't exist. This is the gaslighting thing that they do, right? They say it doesn't exist. And then all of a sudden it's like in your hometown. And they're like, well, yeah, of course it exists. But it's harmless. It's not going to hurt you. I just saw that. Did you see the story? You probably did. I think it was the American Conservative did an article on it. It's in a bunch of different things, but that California is promoting the chanting of the Aztec mantra of human sacrifice. So in California schools, they're now, I'm not joking, publicly pushing the human sacrifice, cannibalism, indigenous traditions of the people as a good thing. And that if you're Hispanic, Latino in California, you need to learn your heritage. You need to celebrate the holy human sacrifice cult that you're actually a part of. And of course, the evil Christian, Western, all of that kind of mindset was oppressing you, right? As if going back to 10,000 people being sacrificed on high holy days is freedom and not. I mean, that's just crazy. But that's now being promoted, and so we would talk about years ago, that some of these people are into literally Dahmer level stuff. People think, oh, Dahmer, he's gross. What if Dahmer is just a low-level guy who got caught, who does the same stuff that the elites are into? That's the thing here, right? Is that so very wealthy people can be very evil, can be very degenerate, and they can toxify the culture to ultimately, from their mindset, just get rid of you. As long as you don't have offspring, they're happy. That's all they care about.
100%. Jay, I love doing these. We got to do them more often, brother, especially when you get over to Rockfin. I do want to remind everybody, rockfin.com/Jason Burmis. Go make the free account. We're double streaming on there right now. We didn't talk about the boop boop, so we don't have to do anything exclusive over there. I'm sure we could talk at length about that and the new rollout of the Biden administration, where they're saying, yes, vaccine passports and apps are going to be a thing just today. A lot of really important stuff. But guys, this is important. Why? Because even people like Eisenhower, that were part of the military-industrial complex that he warned about, that were participants in the Bohemian Grove, said that this is a spiritual battle as well. And I believe that wholly. And I'm telling you right now, the people at the top absolutely believe that. And that's why you're seeing this sort of evil out in the open. jaysanalysis.com is the website. What's the next thing? What are you putting out this week?
Well, last night I did the part 2 of the serial killers talk, which had a good response on that part 1. Had a good audience on that. So the second part for subscribers was just dropped last night and this morning, so people can get. I went really deep into Henry Lee Lucas, Matamoros, really deep into Berkowitz, new information that's emerged on Berkowitz, and some other killers that seemed to be connected with both of those events. So people can just subscribe to the website and get access to the part 2s, as well as the last 5 years of archived lectures and materials on all kinds of stuff. So that's what I'm doing right now. And then I think next up, we're going to start recording our Rockfin exclusive material as well this week. So that should be popping up pretty soon.
Pretty excited about it. All right, brother. I thank you so much. And like I said, we got to do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, man. It was a great chat.
All right, brother. We'll see you later. Everybody else out there, remember, you got to get in on the Rockfin rockfin.com/Jason Burmis. Become a premium subscriber. That's how you can support me. On top of that, there are links down below in the YouTube where you can support me as well. At Jason Burmis is the Twitter and the Venmo. All my documentary films are free. Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order to Find, and Shade the Motion Picture. Only 200 likes. Can we get 300 on the way out? Can we do that, folks? I had fun. I hope you had fun, especially with this very dark material that we are immersed in literally every day by Hollyweird celebritard culture. Love you guys and see you on the flip.